Welcome back to the UK Bike Fit YouTube channel, and on my right we have my old race bike which I have converted and winterized into my winter bike, and on my left we have my current race bike. And today we're going to talk about what I learned from this bike and what I took from this bike which led me to create and choose this bike as my current race bike. So this is my Cannondale CAD 13 and I got it in 2021, which camera guy Chris cannot believe. As soon as I brought this in, he was like, that can't be 4 years old, it looks ancient and all the rest of it, which, you know, that's probably a good pointer towards how quickly the cycling industry moves on, because it probably does look like quite an old bike now, but it's only 4 years old as a frame. So the reason I chose this as a race bike initially was, well, for many reasons. One, it's an aluminium frame, so it's durable. If I crash it, then, which I have done a couple of times, then it's not going to snap, it's not going to break. I might get a few dings and a few scratches on it, but I don't care, like that's fine. The frame will still survive. So that was the first thing. It's not a particularly heavy aluminium frame, it's quite a lightweight aluminium frame, so that was nice as well for racing. Weight is a consideration of the bike, so I was quite happy about that. Another reason I chose this bike and this spec in particular, and again the spec has changed slightly now that I've made it into my winter bike, but the group set has remained the same. So this is an Ultegra mechanical group set. So mechanical cables, the shifting's still absolutely perfect. I think Di2 is slightly overrated. I think mechanical shifters and group sets work absolutely fine. Maybe they need a little bit more fettling with and things like that, but once they're set up, they're absolutely perfect. Di2 is just, it wasn't worth the extra money at the time for me. And another reason for this group set is that, again, mechanical over Di2, it's a bit cheaper. So again, if I was to scuff something or break something, it's quicker and easier and cheaper to replace. So at the time of this bike and choosing this bike, I was just getting into racing and doing crits and road races. So again, the fact that it was not a high spec carbon frame was attractive, because I didn't want to spend loads of money on a bike that I was using for the first time in that way. So again, I didn't want to go and splash out. And the types of racing I was doing at the time, which were crits and road races, a mix of shorter races, longer races, hilly races, flat races, like a bit of everything. So I just wanted a bit of an all-rounder bike. I didn't want a full aero bike. I didn't want a full climbing bike. I wanted something that I could do pretty much everything with, which this is. So one thing I did change on the bike straight away before I started racing was the stem and bars. Now there's a reason why this absolute monster of a stem and ridiculous looking bars are on here. So the bars themselves are Pro Vibe Pursuit bars, or Pursuit Geometry bars, which just means they're a bit longer in reach, so better for that sort of race setup, race position. They're flat topped because bit of aero, like the first thing that hits the wind is the handlebars, so any sort of aero savings up here are always probably more worthwhile than something back here, for example. And the stem is very stiff. That's why it's so chunky. It's a very stiff stem, so for sprinting, for climbing, there's very little movement in the front end of the bars, so it suited what I was doing at the time. There are a few things that aren't on this bike that when I was racing was really important to me. So I've obviously changed the wheel set. These are a shallower rim. I had much deeper wheels on than this because, again, for aerodynamics. The chain set is slightly different. Again, I had like a filled in chain ring, which we'll come to on the other bike, because that's something I've kept from this bike and transferred over. And the other thing I've kept the same is the saddle, because the saddle suits me in every position. So this is my saddle. And just to be super clear, the mudguards have been added for the winter bike spec. I did not race with mudguards on. So that was my race bike back in 2021, and fast forward 4 years, we're now at this, which is the Avec Scythe, or Scythe, however you pronounce it. So first I'll talk about a few of the things I kept, or a few of the components that I wanted to keep from my old bike and put them onto this one. So the first thing is the wheels. So these are pretty much the same wheels that I was using on my other bike. Deep section rims, pretty lightweight for a deep section rim. And the other thing whilst we're talking about wheels is tubes. Now, I really like racing on latex tubes because they have really low rolling resistance. They're quite supple. I just really like the feel of latex tubes. So they have made their way over from that bike to this bike. The other component that I wanted to keep from my old bike is the filled in chain set or chain ring. So this is actually a different chain set, but still with the same principle in that the chain ring is completely filled in without any holes in there. To be honest, I just quite like the look of it, and you know, there's probably an aerodynamic advantage as well, but I do just like the aesthetics of a filled in chain ring, along with an aero frame. And that's the one thing that I didn't feel like I had with the Cannondale, was that the tubing is quite short, and again, it's a bit of an all-rounder bike. It's not an out-and-out aero bike, it's not an out-and-out race bike. So the one thing I did want when I was changing bikes was a more aero frame. So you've got a deep sectioned head tube, you've obviously got deep section tubing all the way down here through the down tube and through the seat tube, and a very chunky bottom bracket, which you can't see because it's behind the chain set. And the other thing is the deep sectioned forks on here. So again, all more material, probably makes it a bit of a heavier frame, but more aerodynamic. Over the last few years, there's obviously been a lot more sort of research, I suppose, and done into aerodynamic bikes and aero frames, and we're learning more and more that aero versus weight is a lot more important, especially when we're talking about racing a crit or even a hilly road race where most of the time you're over 25 mile an hour. Aerodynamics has much more of an advantage than having a lightweight bike. So on my Cannondale, I mentioned my bars being flat topped. Again, for aerodynamics, again, I've gone for the same thing here. These are actually carbon bars, so a bit of an upgrade, but they're still flat top, still aero, because I do think anything that hits the wind first is important to make as aero as possible if you're interested in going fast. So that's one thing that I've kept. The other thing, obviously, is that it's still a disc brake bike. Now, I thought I'd bring this up because a lot of people do still race on rim brakes, and there's nothing wrong with rim brakes. They do still stop your bike. They're just not as good a brake as a disc brake in terms of how fast they can stop you, especially at higher speeds or in the wet. And I think when you're riding in a bunch or in a peloton, that most people around you are on disc brakes. If you're the one on rim brakes, you're not going to be able to stop as fast or as easily as those other guys or girls. So I think having a disc brake bike is pretty essential for racing now, just because everyone else is on a disc brake bike. Another thing that I've pretty much kept the same from my Cannondale, or something I wanted to keep, was a mechanical group set. And again, mechanical group set, fantastic, a lot cheaper than Di2, cheaper to replace components if you need to. It works perfectly fine, shifts really nicely, bit more control over the shifting arguably. So I just really like racing on a mechanical group set, and I've stuck with this with the 105 12-speed mechanical group set. So I've listed a few similarities there, or things that I wanted to keep from my old race bike and almost have the same going on with my new race bike. But the one big difference, going back to the big difference with this frame versus that frame, is the aerodynamics. And it's not just mumbo jumbo and you sort of want it to be faster. It genuinely is night and day how much easier it is to hold speed in a bunch on this bike versus the Cannondale. Once you are traveling at those sorts of speeds, 25 mile an hour plus, it is noticeable how much easier it is to keep that speed, rather than on the Cannondale where you always felt like you were fighting a little bit. Going from that to this, it really is night and day, the difference when you are up to speed. And whilst we're talking about aerodynamics, on a previous video, James Shaw did comment on my steerer being uncut. So James Shaw does not approve, but I'll probably still keep the steerer uncut because I just like having that adjustability in the front end. And if I do ever sell this bike, the next person who rides it might want to lift the stem a little bit. So sorry, James, I'm leaving it. In summary, one of the biggest things that I've taken away from doing this and from racing two different bikes is that you can race pretty much any bike perfectly well. Yes, I've changed a couple of components like the bars, the stem, and I put a different wheel set on it. But ultimately, this didn't hold me back. And don't get me wrong, I'm not winning any races. I'm not winning the Tour de France. But as an enjoyment thing, you can enjoy racing a bike with pretty much any frame, whatever you want. The other thing I've taken away from this is that aerodynamics really does make a big difference in racing, in particular when you are riding at those sorts of speeds. And it really was noticeable. It almost took me away a little bit with this bike, with the Avec, of how much better it was at those higher speeds. And for that reason, I really do love racing this bike or riding this bike fast. It is really nice feel to have a bike that wants to go fast, and it's at its best when it's going fast. But that being said, if you are riding an older bike, or you have an older bike and you're interested in getting into racing, go and do it. Yeah, maybe change the wheels or change a little bit of something, but even then, if you don't want to do that, just go and race the bike. It's really not going to hold you back as much as you think it is going to. And like I say, you can enjoy racing your bike just the same with any type of bike that you want to race. The other thing that I should mention about this is that obviously this is now an out-and-out winter bike for me. So with it being a race bike in the past, if I wanted to turn this back into my race bike, I could easily do that with a few change of components and whip the mudguards off. So if you've got a bike or a winter bike that you think, oh, I need a race bike, I need to buy another bike, maybe you don't. Maybe you could take your current winter bike and just tweak it a little bit, change a few components for a fraction of the cost of a brand new bike, and you could have a perfectly rideable, decent race bike. You obviously can't change the frame or the shape of the frame itself, but there are much more important factors in racing and enjoyment of riding your bike. Like you can get a lot of aerodynamic benefits from the wheels, from the bars, and obviously the main aerodynamic advantage you can get is changing your body position through your bike fit. So it doesn't matter whether your frame's aero or not, you can still race your bike, still be fast, and still enjoy just being out on your bike. So now you've seen those two bikes, let me know in the comments down below which bike you like best. What do you make of the changes that I've put onto this bike to make it into a race bike? And what do you think to turning a winter bike into a race bike and a race bike into a winter bike? Do you think that's possible, or do you think it's actually you'd be really beneficial to get a new bike? Let us know in the comments down below. Like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more and more bike fit content. It really helps us out, and we'll see you in the next one.